Why are we captivated by the actions of a select few people throughout history? Why do legendary heroes always suffer from the trappings of power? Why does modern politics need to be a good guy, bad guy situation? What can we learn from some of the great historical leaders and heroes of the past? And are our glorious heroes doomed finally to disappoint? All this and more on today's edition of The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose. I'm Mark Angelides for LibertyNation.com. We all have our heroes. Sometimes they're close to home, family members and the like. But beyond our immediate geography, we have heroes that we attach characteristics to. Sometimes bravery or courage, sometimes intelligence or talent. But how much do we really venerate them? What is it about proximity that exposes these folk as little more than talented fellow travellers? Most importantly, with our modern heroes being so flawed, do we lose something that those in the past, in the long ago days before Twitter and mass media? Are we losing something that they held dear? Have we lost our ability to see heroes, and for that matter villains, as what they truly are? Hero worship is a double-edged sword. On the positive end, it can be good for us to aspire to similar nobility or courage that we can take from these characters. And kids actually use a type of hero following to learn social interaction and grow as individuals. But there is a darker side too. What happens when we invest ourselves in our chosen saviors and heroes? The fallout from the 2016 presidential election is still happening. Both halves of the country invested everything they had in their chosen hero. And what did it create? Well, it created the vision of a demon on the other side. There are still millions of people who support Hillary Clinton, and have gone even further than they were willing to before. They have changed her into a fallen savior, defeated by an evil tyrant. Part of this is through a certain immaturity, but it goes much deeper. Their inability to let go, to still believe that she is my president, is the danger of making heroes. There's a clear divide between heroes, those that come from classic literature, fictional characters like Odysseus and Achilles, and those that come directly from historical record. The fictional creations, despite being idealized, are far less damaging. Let's look at Homer's man among men, Odysseus, for a moment. What makes Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, such a hero in both the Iliad and the Odyssey? Sure, he's portrayed as a capable warrior of great strength, but this isn't what makes him so great. Achilles is arguably the far better warrior. It's his patient mind that separates him from other men and other heroes. Homer describes him as, quote, Zeus's equal in mind's resource, end quote. We can take this to not just mean intelligence, but also his ability to communicate and inspire. As the poem says, his rhetoric flocked down like snowflakes in winter. We have this man who has such great gifts, but in the very essence of him is a flaw. The name Odysseus means, according to Homer, victim of enmity. You have fate and the gods set against him from the beginning, the enmity of Poseidon, his enduring bad luck. And this is what makes him so inspiring a hero. He's not one to whom all has been given in privilege. Yes, he has gifts. These gifts would make all other men envious. But no one envies the life he has to live, nor the perils he faces in the wars of the Iliad, or the chaotic adventures he endures trying to get home to Penelope and Telemachus in the Odyssey. And there are Odysseus' character flaws, his pride and arrogance. He's a confident guy, and rightly so, but perhaps he wouldn't have so much trouble in his life if he could have reined in the worst of his excesses. To give you a short example, let's look at what happens when he lands on the island of the Cyclopes. First, having escaped the land of the Lotus Eaters, Odysseus and his men come across a small island where they find goats or sheep. They eat their fill and they decide to cross onto the mainland to see what else they can find. This place is the land of the Cyclops, the one-eyed giants. Now these Cyclops, they're pretty peaceful folk, other than their, penchant for eating whatever comes their way. and they live basically a shepherd or farmer type existence. Our hero, he soon finds a cave that has stores of sheep and milk and cheese, plenty of stuff to keep them going on their voyage back to Ithaca. His men say, "Let's grab some stocks and get out of here." But Odysseus, whether through his curiosity or his arrogance at not wanting to appear afraid in front of his troops, decides to stick around and explore everything in the cave. And here's the thing, he wants a guest gift from the owner of the cave. And then comes the Cyclops, Polyphemus, who just happens to be the son of the god Poseidon. After an initial show of hospitality, Polyphemus eats 2 of Odysseus' men and traps them in the cave by shifting a huge rock in front of the entrance. Now our hero, he wants to strike the Cyclops down there and then, but he knows that he would never be able to move that great rock out of the way, so he hatches a plan to rival the mind resource of Zeus himself. The next day, while Polyphemus is out tending his herd, Odysseus and his men, they find a staff. They sharpen the end and harden it with fire. That night, Odysseus, at his charming best, invites the giant to drink his fill of wine. Now this is a super strength wine that should be watered 1 part wine to 20 parts water, but the giant doesn't know. So he drinks up. Full of joviality, the Cyclops, he asks Odysseus his name and where he's from. Odysseus responds that his name is Nobody. Now, when the Cyclops gets drunk and sleepy, our gallant hero takes the sharpened staff and blinds him. Naturally, the giant is furious and calls for help. He shouts to the other Cyclopses, "Nobody is killing me! Nobody is killing me!" So of course the other Cyclops think all is well and good. Now all Odysseus has to do is escape the cave. The men all hide so the blind Cyclops can't find them. And in the morning, when he wants to let his sheep out, he feels the back of these monstrous giant sheeps, so he can catch any of the humans trying to sneak out. But the men, they're clinging to the underbellies of these monstrous sheep, and they escape. This should really be the end of this mini-saga. But Odysseus, he then shows us his real flaws. When they're all safely back on the ship, he taunts the Cyclops, shouting, "If anyone asks who got the better of you, who shamed you, tell them it was Odysseus, son of Laertes from Ithaca." Such pride. This information is enough for the Cyclops to call on his father Poseidon and tell him who to punish, and punish he does. Poseidon takes it upon himself to persecute Odysseus and his men, determined to not let them make it home. It was Odysseus' pride that caused the following trials and tribulations. And it's for this reason that he has remained a hero, his flaws. See, a hero with flaws is all too human, and therefore we understand that we too, with all our flaws, can be heroic when needed. But what happens when we have real people who are seen as heroic, and we ignore their flaws? This is the true danger of admiring heroes. When we place actual real people on pedestals and venerate them, we ignore the darker aspects of their character or their actions. Think about for a moment the new Congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. There's such a division of opinion on her, it's difficult to reconcile. Those on the political right see her as empty-headed yet dangerous because of the sweeping support she has for her plans to remake the USA. And those on the left feel that she can do no wrong, despite her many gaffes, the unworkability of her plans. They see her as the future of the nation. Is she a hero or a villain? That's the important question. The answer may be, sadly, that she's both. I want to tell you about a real historical person who was both hero and villain. His name was Maximinus Thrax, and he was the emperor of Rome for just 3 years, from 235 AD to 238. What makes him so heroic, and of course so pertinent to our examination of Ocasio-Cortez, is his rise to power and lowly birth. What makes him so villainous is what he did once he got there. Maximinus is thought to have come from Thrace, or was at the very least what Romans termed the barbarians. And he was what's known as a low-born person. His parents were neither of the equestrian class nor the senatorial class. Most of the Roman nobility didn't even see him as a true Roman, more of an immigrant upstart, despite the laws in place that gave him Roman citizenship. So he made a name for himself serving under Severus Alexander and commanding the 4th Legion. According to all the contemporary accounts, this man was a giant. He's physically powerful, very tall. He really must have made quite the warrior, the real stuff of heroes. Now, after Severus was assassinated by his own troops, the Praetorian Guard got together and chose Maximinus to be emperor. Then they basically forced the Senate to agree. Remember, the Praetorians were just supposed to be bodyguards for the emperor, but over the centuries they built up a real power base and could essentially guide the exercise of power from behind the scenes, like a major super PAC or special donor. They were the dark hand holding the political reins. So Maximinus becomes emperor. And one thing is abundantly clear. He hates the nobility. He can't stand them. He hates their wealth, their power, their breeding, and their freedoms. This, of course, makes him hugely popular with the rest of the low-born masses, who feel that he really represents them and their interests, because he's one of them. Can you imagine how heroic he must have looked on that very first day as emperor? He has taken power from the old guard, him, a man of the people, just like the majority of the Romans, and he wants to crush the powerful elites who have had a stranglehold on Rome for centuries. Is any of this sounding familiar yet? But then comes villainy, and all, supposedly, committed in the name of the people. Historians talk about how Maximinus doubled the pay of the army, suggesting that he was war-hungry, which to some extent he was. But you have to remember that the Roman army was also responsible for building an infrastructure. These soldiers were also road builders. They were, in today's term, government workers. Doubling the pay had 2 immediate effects. The first is that he secured their loyalty, some might call it bribery. The other was to require major tax increases to pay for his pet projects. And the taxes just kept on coming. He squeezed the wealthy to the point of poverty, imposing new and higher taxes all the time. And when they refused to pay, he accused them of crimes, fraudulently I might add, and then seized their assets. He brought about the conspiracy laws that allowed him to try and punish those who have intent to damage the power structure that he's put in place, even if no actions were taken. And this made it very easy to supply, quote, witnesses to the wrongdoer's intent. But what of the low-born people he represented? Were they happier and more free because of his eat-the-rich attitude? As it happened, no, they weren't. You see, Maximinus never made anything, or increased or encouraged trade. In fact, almost all the wealth of the empire under his reign came from nothing but taxes. He may well have been the first person in all of history, although certainly not the last, to declare that, quote, all wealth belonged to the state, end quote. It's arguable that this is the first recorded instance of proto-Marxism. Perhaps inevitably, the overspending by Maximinus depleted the wealth of everyone, not just the persecuted rich, and this period became known as the start of the imperial crisis, or the military crisis, or as we know it, the beginning of the end of the Roman Empire. Let's recap. We have a man who epitomizes what a hero should be: big, strong, talented, a mighty warrior, a man of the people, from humble beginnings, and all for the low-born people. This guy could have become one of history's legendary figures. But what happened? The simple fact is that he was both a hero and a villain. So where does this leave us today? Should we continue to glorify these real-life heroes and ignore the reality that they may well be tyrants in sheep's clothing? Can we separate our almost innate need for hero worship from the flawed and soiled leaders who seek to guide us in their brave new worlds? And more importantly, why is it the young who are most affected by the idea that heroes live among us? With age comes not only experience, but also an element of cynicism, a certain jaded outlook that colours and shades what the younger elements of society may see as a shining future. When we see a hero rise, we know all too well that history will look back on these new messiahs with scorn or doubt, because we've seen the same thing happen to our childhood heroes. We've seen that a heroic time in a person's life does not make them a hero for eternity. We know that the fall is coming. And when you know that it's inevitable, you know how to look out for the seeds of destruction. Whether it's Odysseus' pride and arrogance, or Maximinus Thrax's belief that all wealth belongs to the state, or Hillary Clinton's hubris and surety that she could win even without the deplorables, each one's heroic rise contained each one's downfall. This is the lesson to be learned. It's time to let go of heroes and villains. It's time to grow up and break the cycle of thousands of years of regret. It's time to realize that if you get up each morning, do your work, look after those you love, and keep on going no matter how hard it gets, then you're the hero, and you need no others. I'm Mark Angelides on The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a production of Liberty Nation. Check out libertynation.com for more podcasts, radio shows, TV, and articles. And tune in next episode, where we'll be looking at the lessons that today's politicians and political elites can learn from one of English literature's most important works, Beowulf. We'll be visiting some of history's greatest leaders, from Julius Caesar to Cesare Borgia to Napoleon Bonaparte. What did they have in common? Why did they achieve what others couldn't? And what hope, or dismay, can this give us in today's elected masses?